Hey guys, this is a review of the Gen 2 Milwaukee M12 Fuel Impact Driver. Milwaukee sent this over for me to take a look at and test, and I'm going to be comparing it to the Gen 1 M12 Fuel Impact Driver, which I've been using for about the last 5 years with zero complaints. So let's take a look at the upgrades this thing offers and see it in action. So here are the two tools side by side, the Gen 1 Impact Driver and the Gen 2 Impact Driver. There's a lot of similarities between these. There's some big changes, and then there's some minor tweaks they've made that aren't noticeable at first glance. So the big change is the length of the two tools. Milwaukee shaved about 0.9 inches off in the length from the Gen 1 to the Gen 2, so this one's now 5.175 inches in length. In doing that, they did add 0.1 inches in diameter to this front impact mechanism. So if you're in areas that you're right up against a wall, you might notice a little bit of a difference in maneuverability, but I really didn't. I've actually already used both of these in that situation, and they performed about the same. So the big advantage is you can shave off a lot in length and get it into tighter areas without having to use a right angle impact driver. Another big change is the drive modes. With this one, you've just got a high speed and a low speed. With this one, you've got 3 speeds and then a self-tapping screw mode for sheet metal. So the first speed is going to be 1300 RPM, the second is 2400 RPM, and the third is 3300 RPM. And the self-tapping screw mode starts out slow, so your screw doesn't wander, goes fast in the middle, and then when it senses it's seating the screw, it slows back down so you don't strip it out. I haven't used this mode because I don't do much sheet metal work, but I can see that being really useful. The only complaint I could think about this is if you really only want the first and the second speed and you don't want all of these, you've just got to hit this button twice instead of once to switch modes. They've also changed the vent locations for the Gen 1 to the Gen 2. And the old one, it was on the back here. And if you really grab this and bear down on it, you could cover the vent up. With the new one, the fan is in the middle, in between the motor, which is back here, and the gearbox and impact mechanism up here. So your fan's in the middle, so if you put your hand on the back of it to bear down, you're not going to be covering those vents as easily as before. I'm really impressed that Milwaukee managed to squeeze as much torque in this as they did. They upgraded it about 9 to 10% torque more than the Gen 1. This now has 1,300 inch-pounds over the 1,200 inch-pounds the Gen 1 had. Some minor changes just to ergonomics. The grip handle is slightly wider. It's about 1/10 of an inch wider than the Gen 1. They've changed this belt hook so it's got metal on both sides of your belt or pocket corner. And they actually changed the positioning of it a little bit. On the Gen 1, it was kind of up here. On this one, it's closer to the center of gravity, so it doesn't tend to twist as much when you hang it on your pants or a belt loop. And if you want, you can still move this to the other side if you're a lefty. The forward and reverse switch is in the same convenient location as is the fuel gauge right here. And some things they did change about it. They made the CG a little bit lower, so if you're like me, I like to keep my middle finger on the trigger. It just helps me line up with the screw a little bit better and push more axially on it. And it sits a little bit lower with the CG in your hand than the old model did as well. And also, the front LED on this has a little bit wider field of view than the old one, so you get more illuminated area on the front. I can't comment on the longevity, but I've used this weekend so far with no problems. I put some shelves in my garage, so I used the full power number 3 setting. I also did some drawer fronts with this, taking on and off, so I used the precision setting as well, and the variable speed trigger offers great control, just like the original model. So now let's just take this thing for a spin and do some demonstrations. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to do some 3-inch wood screws with this. Then I'm going to move on to some 1/4-inch lag bolts, and then some 3/8-inch lag bolts, and then I'll drill some holes. These are half-inch, it's a half-inch bit. So I'm going to start off in mode 3 and just quickly drive some of these screws in. And now I'm going to switch to mode 1. Usually I use mode 2 for screws this big because it can shake you around a little bit if you're using a really big screw with mode 1, but it's super slow and lets you do really precision work without over-torquing stuff. Looks like it might be a little bit low torque for a 3-inch screw, so let's go ahead to mode 2. That really lets you set it in place. So mode 1's more for smaller screws than a 3-inch screw, which is nice because it's not going to overpower a screw and send it way in. So we're back in mode 3 for this one. And I split my board in half. And now if I really want to split the board in half, I'm not going to drill a pilot for these. So here's the 3/8 inch lag. If you're doing something much bigger than this, I'd recommend an 18-volt tool. And now, since I wanted to drill some holes in just one of these boards, I'm going to take them all back apart. And here we go with a 1/2 inch bit. And impact bits like this, made for impact drivers, are a great way to get really fast holes. They're going to be a rough cut, but if all you need to do is drill a hole through a stud that's not going to be seen, it's a great option. So to test out the actual torque capabilities of these, this one's got about 9% more at 108 foot-pounds. This one's got 100 foot-pounds, so 1,300 inch-pounds versus 1,200 inch-pounds. I just wanted to see if it's accurate. So luckily these lug nuts are spec'd to 100 foot-pounds of torque. So I've torqued this one down. It's right at 100. And we're going to see if I can take it off with both of them. And then I'm going to put it back on with this one and verify I'm getting at least 100 foot-pounds. Alright, I had to hammer on it for a while, but it did get there. You can see a little bit more rotation as I was torquing that down. If I sat there and hammered on it for a long time, it might have gotten to 100 foot-pounds, but it was pretty close. Obviously, I have to use a socket adapter on this, so it's going to probably cut down a little bit on the torque output of these. Gen 2 took it right off. A little bit of rotation as well. I'd say they're pretty close to the same amount. It's hard to gauge 9% torque, especially since the torque accuracy on this torque wrench is plus or minus 4%. So I'm willing to give it to both of these. They're pretty close to their advertised spec. Alright, so for my use cases as a DIYer and a woodworker, this M12 Impact is going to work for me just about 95% of the cases that I'm going to need to use it in. I've used this Gen 1 for just about every project I've ever worked on at home. And situations where you just need that little bit more torque, maybe 5% of the time, that's where the M18 system comes into play. And Milwaukee's worked that really well with having the battery chargers for the M18 being able to charge the M12 system as well. Alright, so let's talk price point. Milwaukee is releasing this at a $120 bare tool, which is just the impact driver, no batteries included. You can also buy a 2-battery kit with the compact batteries and a charger and a bag for $170. And the best value, if you get the associated new Gen 2 drill with it, it's $230 for the kit that comes with a extra capacity battery and a compact battery. So Milwaukee is keeping these at the same release point that they did for the Gen 1 Impact drills and drivers, which I think is a great move on their part. They're actually bumping down the price of the Gen 1 tools as well. So I think everyone wins. Whether you're looking for the new, latest and greatest M12 Gen 2 or the Gen 1. And I think the reason Milwaukee's doing this is they realize that just about everyone needs a compact drill and impact driver, so they're using that as a way to get people into the M12 system, kind of as a starter kit, which I think is a great idea. So hopefully this review is helpful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments section below, and once again, don't forget to subscribe.